My father forgot me every Christmas for 34 years. Not the way you forget a name or a date. The way you forget something you decided wasn't worth remembering. And the year I finally stopped showing up at his door, the year I bought a stone manor on a Vermont hill and disappeared into my own silence, that was the year he suddenly remembered exactly where I was. He didn't come with an apology. He came with a crowbar. My name is Nora Ellison. I'm 34. And for most of my life, December 25th meant one specific kind of pain. Not dramatic pain. Quiet pain. The kind where you drive 5 hours through freezing rain with a trunk full of gifts, and when the door opens, the look on your father's face isn't relief. It's irritation. Like you've shown up uninvited to someone else's celebration. Like the daughter standing on his porch in the cold is an interruption to the warmth inside. Like 34 years of existing wasn't quite enough to earn a seat at his table. Last Christmas was the last time I let that happen. I stood there holding bags in both hands, snow melting into my collar, watching my father's eyes dart past me like he was hoping I'd brought someone more interesting along. My brother Logan was already inside, loud and easy, and wanted the way he'd always been wanted. My mother moved through the kitchen like she owned the air in every room. And me. I was the one everyone remembered to include only after it was too late to matter. I put the bags down on the porch. I turned around. I drove home. And I made a decision so quiet that nobody noticed it until it was already done. By spring I had erased myself from every surface they might use to find me. New number. Locked accounts. Mail rerouted through a private box 2 towns over. No social media. No tagged photos. No digital footprints leading anywhere near wherever I was going next. And where I was going was a manor on a hill outside Evergreen Hollow, Vermont. Old stone walls. Iron gates. Enough land that the rest of the world felt like a rumor. The locals called it Blackthorn Manor. It sat inside a historic preservation district wrapped in so much legal protection that most buyers saw red tape and kept scrolling. I saw armor. I bought it through a trust structure specifically because the title was complicated. The paperwork was hard to follow. My name didn't sit on the deed the way a normal purchase would. It sat inside a legal arrangement too boring for careless people to understand and too strong for liars to unravel. I didn't buy it to feel wealthy. I bought it because I was exhausted from being reachable. 3 days before Christmas, I drove up with groceries, candles, good wine, and no plans that involved performing gratitude for people who forgot I existed the moment the holiday was over. I stood in the front hall that first night and listened to the silence settle around me like it had been saving itself for exactly this. No one asking what I brought. No one comparing me to Logan. No one telling me to be patient, be gracious, be the bigger person, as if absorbing neglect had always been some moral test I was supposed to pass with a smile and a casserole dish. I lit the library fireplace. Poured a glass of Cabernet. Sat in a leather chair and watched the flames move. And then I laughed out loud in an empty room. Because for the first time in 34 years, I felt safe inside a December. I should have known that kind of peace would never go unchallenged. I heard the engines before I saw the cars. That road leads almost nowhere. Nobody drives up it by accident, especially not in late afternoon with snow starting and the temperature dropping fast. I moved to the front window and kept the lights off. 2 dark SUVs rolled into view. Behind them, a locksmith van. My first feeling wasn't fear. It was insult. My father stepped out of the first SUV wearing that tired, reasonable expression he used whenever he needed strangers to believe he was the adult in the room. The one who had tried everything. The one who was only here out of love. My mother followed in a cream wool coat, dressed like she was arriving for a holiday photo shoot rather than a trespass. And Logan climbed out of the second vehicle already talking into his phone, then started unloading flat-packed display stands and storage bins like he was arriving for a job. That one detail told me everything. They weren't here to visit. They were here to install themselves. I walked down to the gate and stopped on my side of the bars. My father spoke first. He stepped forward with a document folded in one hand and the expression of a man who expected this to be simple. Nora. Open the gate. It's cold out here. How did you find me? I asked. My mother answered before he could. Logan found a tagged flooring photo online. Then cross-referenced the stonework with a preservation archive. She paused, just long enough. You really should be more careful. So calm. As if hunting me down was a lesson in my own carelessness. My father stepped forward and pressed the folded document against the bars. I looked at it. Shared residential use agreement. Guest wing access. Family holiday overflow. Event hosting rights. Long-term occupancy protections. At the bottom, a version of my signature close enough to make my stomach drop. Not because I thought it would survive a courtroom, but because I immediately understood their strategy. Get inside first. Create chaos second. Force me into a slow legal war while Logan turned my house into a content backdrop and my father called it a family arrangement. This is fake, I said. My mother touched the corner of one very dry eye and turned slightly toward the locksmith, making sure he had a clear view of her profile. She's confused, she said softly. She's been isolating herself for months. We're only here because we're worried. My father used his low professional tone. The one that had gotten him out of accountability his entire life. We have an agreement and a family situation. We're only trying to settle in quietly. Logan needs temporary space for a holiday content business he's launching. And there it was. The real reason my father had suddenly remembered he had a daughter. Not love. Not guilt. Not 34 years of forgetting my seat at his table. Logan needed a prestigious venue. My father needed the arrangement to look cooperative. And my mother needed the image, the curated family Christmas, her at the center of it, warm and elegant and impossible to question. I looked directly at Logan. Are you trying to run a business out of my home? He smirked. It's not your home like that, Nora. That sentence. I never forgot it. Not your home like that. Because underneath every lie my family had ever told, the belief had always been the same. Nothing that belonged to me truly counted as mine if they decided they wanted it more. Then the locksmith stepped forward with his drill. That casually. That entitled. They expected me to panic. To raise my voice. To become the unstable, isolated daughter my mother had already described to everyone who would listen before she ever drove up that hill. Instead, I took out my phone and pressed record. My mother's smile dropped for the first time. What are you doing, Nora? I held the camera steady on the drill, on the van logo, on Logan's face, on my father holding forged paperwork like it was already enough to win. Building a timeline, I said. And I watched all three of them realize, in the same moment, that I was no longer the daughter who stood in the cold hoping someone would let her in. The deputy arrived just as the drill touched the gate control box. I had called the moment the tool came out. Deputy Mason Cole was young, cold, and already irritated before he stepped out of his cruiser. He looked from me to the SUVs to the document in my father's hand, and I could see him calculating how much effort he wanted to spend on what he assumed was a wealthy family disagreement. My mother moved first. She always moved first. She approached him with the perfect tremble in her voice. "Deputy, thank God. Our daughter has shut herself away. She isn't well. We've been trying to reach her for weeks." My father handed over the paperwork with a weary, patient expression, designed to imply he had done everything correctly and I had forced this scene. Logan stood in the background rolling his eyes like I was making everyone's lives difficult again. I stayed exactly where I was. Phone recording at my side. I said my name. I said I was the lawful resident. I said they had no permission to enter. I said the signature was forged. The deputy glanced at the papers, glanced at me, and made the mistake too many people had made before him. He listened to the calmer liar. My mother lowered her voice to something just above a whisper. She gets like this when she feels rejected. She thinks everything is an attack. Rejected. As if my father forgetting me at every Christmas table for 3 decades was an emotion I had invented rather than a pattern he had built. The deputy gave me the look reserved for women who are inconvenient but articulate. "Ma'am, if there's a dispute over document validity, this may be a civil matter." My father saw the opening immediately. "We're not trying to remove her. We're supporting family use of the property. Logan needs temporary space." Nora had agreed before she started pulling away again. I called my attorney. Elena Vargas picked up on the second ring. I gave her the facts fast. Forged occupancy agreement. Attempted forced entry. Possible utility fraud. Preservation district property. Active police presence. Elena didn't waste a second. "Don't let them bait you into a screaming match. Keep recording. Ask the deputy to verify title ownership, not just residency paperwork. And if Logan is using the property for commercial activity, he is about to bury himself." I looked at my family, the bins, the performance, my father playing the exhausted patriarch who had tried everything to reach his difficult daughter. And for the first time that afternoon, I felt something steadier than anger. I felt structure. They had come believing I was alone and unprotected. What they had walked into was a system of documentation, zoning law, and title structure none of them had thought to research before they loaded the van. My mother noticed my expression change. I think that was the exact moment she understood her usual weapon, my silence, had been retired. Elena called the deputy directly. Then emailed certified title documents to his department while I stood in the cold watching my family perform innocence beside a locksmith van. 10 minutes later, the mood changed. Not quickly. Slowly. Like ice cracking under weight that had been building for a long time. The deputy returned with new stiffness in his posture and asked my father for the agreement again. Then he asked the question my father had never prepared for. "If your daughter signed this as owner, why is title held by the Blackthorn Heritage Residential Trust?" My father blinked. Logan went completely still. My mother lost her expression for a full second before she assembled it back into place. The deputy continued with the flat patience of someone who has just realized they've been dragged into a lie. "Ms. Ellison is the resident beneficiary and trustee occupant. She is not individually titled the way this document claims. That means your agreement has a serious validity problem before we even get to the alleged signature." Elena joined by speakerphone. Listening to her dismantle them was almost luxurious. She explained that no one had authority to create private occupancy rights against the trust structure the way the document attempted. She explained that any planned commercial use in a preservation district without board approval would trigger historical violations. She explained that if Logan had already initiated utilities or seasonal business services using my personal information, the matter had moved well beyond a family misunderstanding. My mother tried to interrupt with something about concern and generosity. Elena cut straight through it. Concern, she said, does not arrive with a drill. Nobody spoke for a moment. The deputy told them to leave the premises and stop unloading equipment. Logan argued. Called it harassment. Said I had promised space. Said I was sabotaging his launch. My father tried the reasonable man routine one final time. Surely this can be resolved privately. But there was nothing private left. My phone had all of it. The deputy had all of it. Elena had all of it. My mother stepped close to the bars and hissed my name in a voice too low for the deputy and not low enough for me. You are humiliating us. That word almost made me laugh. As if humiliation had just arrived in our family on that cold December afternoon, rather than sitting beside me at every Christmas table since I was a child, every missed birthday, every door that opened and didn't look glad to see me. They packed up slowly. Not like people accepting defeat. Like people storing fury for a later date. Logan cracked a bin, slamming it back into the SUV. My father folded the forged paperwork with shaking hands and kept looking at me like he was trying to memorize the version of me that had become dangerous. My mother said nothing else in front of the deputy. Which was how I knew she was already composing the next version of the story. I thought I had won the afternoon cleanly. I was wrong. Inside, I checked my camera feed. Static on the front angle. Then the side entrance cut to black. Logan had done something at the cable junction on his way out. He hadn't cut the power. He had done something more intentional, blinded the two cameras that would matter most if they came back after dark. 20 minutes later, my phone rang from the utility company asking me to confirm a service update request I had never made. Logan had already tried to move part of the account. Social security fragments. Old addresses. Security prompts. Information only someone from inside my life would know. My skin went cold in a way the winter air outside couldn't manage. That night I sat at the library desk and built the file that would later ruin them. Froze my credit. Documented the utility attempt. Sent Elena every screenshot. Filed an identity theft report. Wrote the full timeline by hand because some things are easier to trust when you can see them in ink on a page. And sometime after midnight, while the fire burned low and the old manor settled around me, I understood something simple and ugly. My father hadn't driven 5 hours on a December evening because he finally felt guilty for 34 years of empty Christmases. He had driven 5 hours because I had finally built something outside his reach. And the only way he could live with that was to take it. That kind of desperation doesn't leave quietly. It circles. It returns. By morning, my mother had done exactly what I knew she would. She went public first. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a screenshot before breakfast. My mother had posted on Facebook that she and my father had driven all the way to Vermont to check on their isolated, troubled daughter, only to find me confused, aggressive, and hiding alone in a dark historic home after weeks of concerning behavior. The comments poured in. Praying for your family. She always seemed troubled. Some children don't understand how much their parents sacrifice. I read every single word. Then I screenshotted everything and saved it to a folder labeled defamation. That was the difference between the old me and the woman sitting in Blackthorn Manor now. I no longer argued with lies in real time. I archived them. Around 10 that morning, Logan tried a different angle. He submitted a vendor inquiry for a seasonal event permit using my address and a slightly altered version of my name, probably hoping to build a paper trail suggesting operations had already begun with my knowledge. That was when the full architecture of their plan locked into place. Logan was drowning financially and needed a prestigious venue fast. My mother wanted the social image, a curated family Christmas with herself at the center of it, warm and elegant and in a house nobody could ignore. And my father wanted the whole thing framed as a cooperative family arrangement so that no one would ask where the funding came from, or why a daughter who hadn't been invited to Christmas in years was suddenly hosting it. They weren't trying to take shelter. They were trying to take narrative and legitimacy in one clean move. Elena called before noon. If they came back and attempted entry again, especially with commercial materials or fabricated authority documents, we could build a criminal and civil package strong enough to end the conversation permanently. June Mercer from the local paper returned my email. Careful, not dramatic. The screenshots, the forged agreement, the utility attempt, and the preservation issues made this more than family gossip, if I could prove intent and repeated conduct. I told her I thought I could. Then I made the decision that changed the ending. I stopped thinking like a daughter defending her peace and started thinking like someone setting a trap with evidence as the teeth. Through Harold Whitmore at the local Heritage Society, I arranged a small Christmas Eve open house under the Trust's permitted residential heritage hospitality guidelines. Boring enough on paper to sound routine. Powerful enough in practice to place credible witnesses inside the house before my family arrived to take it. No public announcement. No social media. Just a handful of invited locals, a reporter, my attorney on standby, a retired locksmith named Caleb Dunn who could document exactly what kind of forced access had been attempted the day before, and Officer Reed Porter working a private security detail, with a deputy close enough to move the moment entry crossed the line. The point wasn't a gathering. The point was witnesses my family could not outtalk, outcharm, or outlast. By late afternoon on Christmas Eve, the house looked dark from the road. On purpose. Curtains drawn. Exterior lights off. No sign of life visible from the drive. Inside was completely different. Lamps burned low in the library and dining room. Harold and 2 preservation board members sat with mulled wine discussing plaster restoration in voices so calm it felt surreal. June positioned near the front hall where she could see and hear everything without becoming part of it. Caleb stood by the back corridor window with the posture of a man already quietly furious at whatever fool thought historic stone houses were easy to breach. I stood in the foyer in a black dress I had chosen for one specific reason. I wanted to look like someone who belonged entirely in her own home. 7 o'clock came and went. For a moment I almost wondered if they had finally found caution. Then at 7:14, the sensor on the outer drive lit up my phone. Headlights off. Moving slow. A rental truck behind the second SUV. Not subtle anymore. Not even trying. My father had forgotten me every Christmas for 34 years. Now he was back on Christmas Eve with a truck, tools, and enough nerve to believe the dark house at the top of the hill was empty and waiting to be claimed. He was about to learn. I watched from the front window as they pulled in without headlights. That one detail said everything I needed to know about how innocent they believed they were. Logan jumped out first. Crowbar in hand. The cornered, manic energy of someone who had burned through every softer option and arrived at the last one. My father followed carrying a thick folder, another performance, another stack of documents that existed to buy 30 seconds of confusion. My mother stepped out last. Dark coat. Perfect hair. Makeup flawless. Because even now, at the literal edge of a crime on Christmas Eve, she wanted to look good doing it. There was a second locksmith too. Young. Nervous in the precise way people are when they realize too late that someone else's family crisis might actually be a felony. Nobody inside the house moved toward the door. That was the beauty of it. We let them prove intent without a single interruption. Through old stone and thick wood we heard everything. Logan, just break the side glass if the lock fights you. My father to the locksmith, calm and authoritative, we have power of attorney and a right to intervene. My mother's voice, raised just enough to carry, soft enough to sound heartbroken if any stranger happened to hear, Nora, sweetheart, open the door. We're here because we love you. There was no love in the crowbar that connected with my front lock a moment later. The first strike echoed through the foyer so sharply that the preservation board members in the dining room went completely still. The second blow splintered the frame. Then the drill. Then the prying. Then my father barking instructions like a man who had spent his entire life expecting the world to comply. And then the old door gave, with a crack that sounded less like wood breaking than history finally running out of patience. Logan stumbled in first. Breathing hard. Crowbar still in his fist. Triumph arranged across his face. For one full second, he stood there and believed he had won. Then the lights came up. Not every lamp. Just enough. Enough light to catch them in the foyer, ruined lock, broken frame, tools in hand. Enough light for them to see me standing at the foot of the staircase in a black dress, completely still, watching them the way you watch something you have prepared for. Enough for them to see June Mercer lifting her phone. Enough for them to see Harold Whitmore and the preservation board members in the dining room doorway, staring with the expression of people who have just watched someone take a crowbar to a church door. Enough for Caleb Dunn to step forward and say with total, unadorned contempt, "That is forced entry." Enough for Officer Reed Porter to emerge from the hallway. The deputy right behind him. Flashlights swept their faces hard and fast. Hands where I can see them. Right now. Officer Porter didn't look at the folder. Family does not break into a protected residence with burglary tools. Logan lowered the crowbar slowly. Like a man only just remembering that metal had weight. My mother stared at me from across the ruined foyer with a hatred so precise it almost looked clean. "You set us up," she whispered. I looked at the woman whose husband had forgotten me at every Christmas table for 34 years. The woman who had helped him do it. The woman who had told the internet I was confused and troubled and hiding, all before she climbed in the SUV and drove to take what I built. "No," I said. "I documented you." Elena stepped forward and took the folder from my father's hand. 4 seconds of scanning. Fake emergency authority. Invalid on its face. Wrong execution standard, wrong witness structure, wrong property relationship. She looked up at my father with the expression of someone who has seen very sloppy fraud before and finds it personally offensive. "You committed a felony with paperwork downloaded from the internet." June almost smiled. She didn't stop recording. My mother tried one final angle. She began to cry. Loudly. Beautifully. With full control, the same performance she had delivered for 30 years whenever she needed strangers to see suffering instead of strategy. June had the Facebook post that called me confused and troubled, timestamped before my mother left her driveway. I had the utility fraud trail from the night before. Caleb had documented the earlier forced access attempt from the afternoon. Harold had personally witnessed the commercial equipment on day one and understood exactly what heritage violations had been planned. My father made one last attempt to reframe reality. This has gone too far. Nora, tell them we only came to talk. I looked at him. I thought of every Christmas I had driven toward his house and stood on his porch feeling like an interruption. Every year the seat that wasn't saved. Every gift that arrived too late or not at all. Every time I watched my brother get pulled into the warmth of a room while the door moved to close before I was fully through it. 34 years of being the daughter my father forgot until I built something he wanted. People who come to talk, I said, don't bring crowbars. Officer Porter moved on Logan first. Logan panicked at exactly the wrong moment. He turned like he was going to bolt for the open door. The deputy caught him before he made it 2 steps. The crowbar hit the marble floor with a sound so final it made my mother actually gasp. Handcuffs closed around Logan's wrists. She had one move left. Cruelty had always been her last language and her most fluent one. After everything we did for you, she said, voice dropping to that sharp familiar whisper, this is how you repay us. I took one step closer. The house was warm at my back. Snow was blowing in through the broken frame around us. Everything you ever did for me had a receipt attached, I said. Love doesn't break in. Love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't wait 34 years and then show up on Christmas Eve to see whether the house can be turned into profit. Officer Porter told her to turn around. She did. Slowly. With the expression of a woman who had genuinely expected the universe to recognize who she was and make an exception. When the handcuffs closed on her wrists, the sound was smaller than I expected. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just precise. Logan cried first. My mother kept asking for a private conversation. My father said almost nothing once he understood that no one in that house cared anymore how reasonable he looked. It was about a planned holiday takeover of a protected historic home. Forged family documents. Utility fraud. A staged public narrative that collapsed the moment it made contact with actual evidence. Logan's business partnerships evaporated within the week. Vendors withdrew. His accounts linked to the holiday venture were suspended. My father spent the first weeks of the new year paying attorneys instead of controlling rooms. And my mother, who had built her entire identity around being seen as warm and impossible to question, had to live in a community that now knew exactly what her tears were worth. That night, after the statements were taken and the cruisers were gone and a temporary board was nailed over the broken door, I stood alone in the great hall. Christmas tree lit. Fire low. A glass of wine in my hand. And the quiet I had been building toward all year finally settling around me like it belonged there. I thought about what it costs to be the child a parent forgets. Not once, not accidentally, but consistently, seasonally, the way some people forget to water a plant they never really wanted in the first place. I thought about 34 Decembers of driving toward a door that opened like an inconvenience. And I thought about how strange it is, how perfectly, brutally strange, that the moment you build something beautiful on your own, the people who forgot you for decades suddenly develop very strong opinions about who it belongs to. Here is what I know now. Some people will call your boundary cruelty because your compliance used to cost you and benefit them. A father who forgets you every Christmas isn't a forgetful man. He's a man who made a choice, repeatedly, and dressed it as distraction. And the daughter who finally stops showing up at his door isn't cold. She's done. Protecting yourself from people who keep wounding you is not a betrayal of love. Sometimes it's the only honest thing left to do. I did not spend 34 years being forgotten so that the year I finally built something worth having, I could hand it to the people who taught me what it felt like to be unwanted. My father forgot me every Christmas. Until I bought a manor. Until I built something he could see from a distance and want. And that, right there, tells you everything about the difference between love and appetite. For the first time in 34 years, Christmas didn't feel like the season I got left out. It felt like the season I finally came home. And this time I owned the door.